Rev up your engines! Now, if you've watched me, you'll say a lot of times I say, watch out for Subarus, head gaskets blown, weak automatic transmissions. And yes, that can be true. Let's take this 2005. It's a 15-year-old Forester. Got the plain 4-cylinder engine. Got 165,000 miles on it. And it still runs really well. Shifts really well. Corners. The all-wheel drive system still works. There's something you got to realize about this particular Subaru. Check this out. Go down to the plate here, and what does it say? Made in Tokyo, Japan. By Fuji Heavy Industries. Yes, indeed, the ones made in Japan are best. And interestingly enough, as it stands at least today, all the Foresters are still made in Japan. They make other ones in Indiana, but they only make the Foresters in Japan. And the other thing you have to realize is, this Subaru is driven by a little old lady. She does not drive like a maniac. She babies her car. And when babied, these little bitty 4-cylinder boxer engines with 2 cylinders on this side and another 2 cylinders on that side, they can actually last a long time. Just like the old Volkswagen Beetle engines. Those were 4 cylinders, 2 on each side, the boxer design. And if you didn't beat them up and took care of them, they could last a long time. In my own experience with these Subarus, the ones that tend to fall apart are the ones that are driven really hard by either younger people or guys or gals, and especially the ones with the 6-cylinder engines. Those are very powerful engines, but they do have a problem of getting engine noise, wearing out, and they can easily burn out the automatic transmissions with all that power. Now this 4-cylinder, it does have an automatic transmission. It's not a standard. I would prefer the standard, but this is an automatic, and it's still shifting strong even with 160-something thousand miles on it. But the small 4-cylinder engine, now it does put out 168 horsepower, so it's decent enough for pulling it around, but the modern 6-cylinder box engine puts out 256 horsepower. Can eat up the automatic transmissions. Heck of a lot faster than these little 4-cylinder engines do. So this Subaru Forester with the 4-cylinder engine, made in Japan, these things actually can last quite some time if you take care of them. And of course, like all the other Subarus except for the sports car, they're all-wheel drive. So Subaru is actually an excellent company if you want all-wheel drive systems. You live where it snows a lot. You go in the mountains skiing and stuff. Whenever I go in the mountains where I know there's going to be snow, if they got a Subaru for rent at the rental place, I'll rent it. Because Subaru has pretty much perfected all-wheel drive systems. They've been making them for so long. And in the case of these Foresters, they're still all made in Japan. So they got quality that you don't see where they're made in other places. Now this particular one got great use. Just your dog carrying. As you can see, pretty basic inside. Dog footprints and dirt, but hey, this thing's old, still taking it. The dogs haven't ripped it to shreds or anything. The cage out of the way, the seats flip back. Man, this thing's got a lot of space in it. And sure, it's no race car. Now the 6-cylinder ones, they are pretty zippy, but to this day, I still don't advise people to buy them as long-term cars. The engines have had problems as they age. They can burn out the transmission easier. If you're not a race demon, you don't mind a solid car that goes down the road. You're not going to win any races in it, but it can last. Just don't do like some of my younger customers. You buy a used one like this, a lot of miles, then decide, ooh, I'm gonna soup it up. I'm gonna put a supercharger on it or a turbocharger on it and put bigger wheels on it and all that stuff. No, don't do that. Dependable but slow workhorses. Now Subaru in 2019 sold the 2 millionth of these Foresters. Some guy in New York State bought it. Well, it makes sense. It gets snow in upstate New York. They have been a pretty popular model. And as far as the figures show, 970,000 of the million Subaru Foresters sold in the last 10 years in the United States are still on the road. So that's saying that 97% of them are still driving, which when you think about it is a pretty remarkable figure, because maybe 3% of them were totaled in wrecks. Only 3% of them aren't on the road. That's kind of a miracle in modern day. You know, you have to understand that Subaru is a smaller car manufacturer. They don't have a zillion plants. They make them in Japan, they make them in Indiana. They're not a gigantic. They're part of Fuji Heavy Industries, which is a humongous corporation. The car version of it isn't that big of a deal to them. But what I've seen in these 4-cylinder Foresters, they're still making them good in Japan. They obviously have pride in what they're making. Now you take the Subaru BRZ. Well, now that's only a rear-wheel drive. It's not all-wheel drive. And those are zippy run-around cars. Guys tend to beat those cars pretty heavily when they buy a car like that. They often will have them turbocharged, or they'll supercharge them themselves. And I personally like the older ones like this. They're a nice size to me. The new ones are getting bigger and bigger like everything else. I mean, eventually somebody's going to realize the price of gas is going to go sky high again, and gigantic big gas hog machines are going to become extinct like the dinosaurs. I just like the smaller size myself. The engine could take it. They can last a long time. They're easy to park. And they're certainly not going to win any beauty contests, but that's not what they're for. For someone who takes care of their car, services it regularly, changes the oil regularly, they're still well-built cars. They're still only made in Japan. And of course, for those who want it, the Symmetrical all-wheel drive is a great system, as long as you remember my warning. You don't buy one of these things to get a racehorse. I would not advise buying one of these with the 6-cylinder engine in it. They've had too many problems historically. The transmissions can burn out fast on those things. And if you want to compare it to a standard, a 4-wheel drive RAV4, take a 2019, the 4-cylinder version of this is about $24,000, and you're going to pay a lot more for a 4-wheel drive 4-cylinder RAV4. I had a customer just buy a 2019 RAV4 all-wheel drive, $30,000. You actually would be saving quite a bit of money buying one of these if you needed an all-wheel drive vehicle. And yeah, Subaru's a lot smaller company than Toyota. A little 4-cylinder one, they can be quite reliable if you take care of them, rev them up, drive them like lunatics, because I did that once with a Toyota Camry station wagon I had. Gave it to my oldest son. He's learning how to drive, and he was driving it around. It started burning some oil. I said, what have you been doing? It turns out he was racing his friend in a Chrysler 300, going over 100 miles an hour in that thing, and it was old. It had a lot of miles on it. Well, that wore that engine quite a bit. So if you're looking for an all-wheel drive vehicle that's made in Japan, you might think about a Subaru Forester. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Ozark Dad 67 says, Scotty, I got 05 Infiniti FX35 that drinks oil. What do I do? Okay. Well, you only got two choices, really. One, change the PCV valve. If it's stuck open, it's going to suck oil along with the oil vapor from the crankcase. That's why it's called positive crankcase ventilation valve, PCV valve. Try it safe. If it's not that, your engine's just wearing out. Infinitis are notorious as they age for burning oil. The valve seals can wear, the piston ring can wear, and that's all uber expensive. On that quad cam V6 engine, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to rebuild them. So in the case of yours, just check it. If the PCV valve changing doesn't fix it, add oil, maybe think about getting another vehicle in the near future, because eventually it will burn so much oil that it won't pass any emissions testing, and that eventually it'll start ruining everything. It'll clog the catalytic converter, the oxygen sensors, spark plugs will carbon up all the time. It may be telling you it's time to say goodbye. Big Bad John says, Scotty, my dad turned me onto your channel. I love it. Thanks. I got a stumper. Got an '07 Honda Fit. Throws misfire on 2 and 4. I replaced spark plugs, ignition coil packs, but now it's just on number 2. And you got 260,000 miles. Here's something about Hondas a lot of people don't really know that they have to do. You got to adjust the valves on them. Many modern cars have hydraulic lifters. You don't adjust the valves. They're automatically adjusted. If the lifters break, they'll clack and make noise. You got to replace the lifters, but you don't adjust the valves. And even most of the Toyotas, they have cams, and then they have stainless steel shims that push the valves open. And theoretically, they have to be adjusted every once in a while, but you can't adjust them manually. You would have to replace the shims with bigger shims to compensate for the wear. It's a real pain in the wazoo. But I've seen them with 500,000 miles. They've never been touched, and they're still within specs. So, but Hondas, the valves do need to be adjusted every once in a while. First, start by having the valves adjusted. It could be that simple. That number 2 valve is way out of adjustment. It's going to misfire. Pray it's that and not the head gasket starting to blow, which with that kind of mileage, 260,000 miles, I don't know if you want to rebuild an engine on something like that. But it could be as simple as just adjusting the valves. Start there. That's what a lot of people don't realize on Hondas. You got to adjust the valves every once in a while on Hondas. Most other cars, no. You don't have to do anything. But Hondas, you have to. Yoda for Life 80 says, Scotty, love everything you stand for and provide. 2008 Corolla with 5-speed manual, 180,000 miles. Grinds from second to third. Should I rebuild it? You think it's a Synchro, or should I live with it? Well, I can guarantee it's a Synchro starting to go out. I had a vehicle like that, but I drove it 5 years like that. Sold it to another guy, then he drove it for 3 years before it finally went on a junkyard. But he only paid me $400 for the car, so I mean, hey. The Synchro's going out, but you can often drive gears that way, just kind of baby it when you're shifting that particular gear, when you're going from second to third. Rebuilding it costs an awful lot of money. I mean, I know guys that rebuild them, but you're looking at, thousands of dollars to rebuild them correctly. In that case, if it ever did go out and you like the car, get a used standard transmission put in, because standard transmissions generally last a really long time, and there's nothing wrong with putting a used Toyota standard transmission in. Used automatics, bigger gamble. Used standards, not as much. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.